Hey everyone, it's Richard Solomon, and good to be with you all here again. It was a really good question I got in one of our Facebook group, and I thought it would be great to make a video about it. Morning, good evening, good night to you, depending on where and when you're viewing this. And if you're not yet a member of our Facebook group, be sure to search for DCC Consulting Academy. If you are thinking about becoming a consultant, if you are already freelancing and you want to build a big or at least a sustainable business, you want to join that group. So just click join the group, and there'll be a couple of questions, easy ones, answer that, and one of the admins will put you in. All right, so I got a really good question from one of our group members, and the question was, how do you find your first client? And when you've been doing something for as long as I have, it's been now 21 years, the first client is a long way away, has been a long way away, 21 years ago, somewhere down that way. And it's not something I think about often, but I was really grateful for the question, and I could imagine if you are just starting out or you are thinking about starting out, and especially if all you've ever done is had a job where your employer paid you every month, or every week or every fortnight, whatever it is, then that must be a real question. How do you find your first client? And I'm glad to make this video at this time. It's just heading to lunchtime, and I'm actually between clients. It's not usual that I have, it works this way, but this morning I met with the board of a state organization or state body, and we're just getting started to support them on some organization development work. And so after that, now I'm heading to do some work with a private sector organization in the energy sector. I'm working with the regional management team. So it's the executive team, that'll be the CEO and his direct reports on some OD type or organization development type issues as well. And it's a long way away from the first client, now we work with organizations, and when people say, tell us some of the organizations you've worked with, I'd say, it's a lot easier for me to tell you some of the organizations we have not worked with, because you can imagine over 21 years, now in 41 countries, we've worked with a lot of organizations, especially in our local country, Trinidad and Tobago, and then of course by extension the Caribbean region, and then beyond that the Americas. But certainly in Trinidad and Tobago, most of the largest employers in the country we have provided services to in some way, manner or form at some point in time. Let's go back. How do you find your first client? Well, I'll tell you, generally, and in my experience it has been this way, your first client is going to come through or by someone you already know. So even now, where social media is as big as it is, and we're able to reach out to people halfway around the world, people are not going to hire you if they don't know you, and more so if they don't trust you. Especially where you don't have a track record as a provider, as a supplier. You may have done similar work in your role as an employee, but you may not have done that type of work yet as a consultant, a freelancer, as a supplier. So more than likely, your first client is going to come through your network. For me, when I first started out, I was calling someone, and in those days, it was your landline. Did not have a cell phone yet, and at least I did not have one at that time. And I got a beep on the other line, as you would say it, and someone called me to ask me if I could find someone for an organization for which she was a board member to do a particular piece of work. And it's work that I had done, and she wasn't calling for that, but she was calling because she knew that I had worked in that sector. And I said, well, I can do that work, and she said, okay, why don't you call the general manager and have a meeting with him and see where it goes from there. And I did that. And he was interviewing almost for an employee. And at the end I said, well, I can do the work, but I don't want the job. And that was a little bit odd, but that was my first consulting project, as it were, where I had the freedom to go in, do the work, but I didn't have to go in for 8, leave at 4, I didn't have to go in every day, and I was free to do other things once I delivered what the organization asked for. So that was my first one. That was my first paying client, as it were. And it stands that was a piece of work that came through a network. So where do you find your first client? Usually it's going to be through your network. Now, there are some questions I will follow on. How do you work your network so that you can let people know I'm doing this now, so that people know that you're open for business, etc. That's another question that certainly will be answered in our first program that's coming up soon. So again, you want to join that Facebook DCC Consulting Facebook group and or DCC Consulting Academy Facebook group, and we'll answer that in a little bit more depth. But where do you find your first client? Usually it's gonna be through someone that you know. I heard someone say your network determines your net worth. So that's something to think about. That's the answer to that question. First client is gonna come through your network. This is Richard Solomon. Good to be with you, and we will chat soon. Take care.